is the big movement, the payout to the center which has been given by the RBI. It's record breaking, the dividend. Let's quickly put up that graphic on screen. Between 2004 and 2014, the average payout per year was 20,000 crores. Between 2015 and 2019, the average payout was 54,000 crores. But in this year, 2019, the payout is 1,76,000 crores. 1.76 lakh crore rupees. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth as far as political allegations are concerned, whether this was a right step to take, whether certain steps should have been taken earlier to avoid a situation where you had to dip into central reserves. Let's just put all of these things to a debate and ask a fundamental question as I introduce my guests one by one. We've got Ashok Desai, former Chief Advisor of the Finance Ministry, Government of India; Rajat Sethi, a political analyst; Sunil Alag, an independent business consultant; Renu Kohli, independent economist and former staff member of the RBI and the IMS; Amitabh Dubey, a political analyst, as well as in just a short moment, hopefully we'll have Mr. Prasenjit Bose as well, a top economist. The fundamental question to ask over here is this. Is there a crisis? Yes. The government acknowledges it. Did some steps have to be taken? Yes. Measures had to be taken. Could this have been one of the measures? Perhaps. Is there any alternative to this measure? Let's put that to debate. Is this perhaps the government's prerogative? At this moment, if we are calling this contingency, is the government declaring this a crisis, an emergency-like situation where we need this contingency fund? And also, what are the other alternatives? Because see, 1.76 lakh crores alone is not going to revive our economy. It may be like a booster shot. But what will we do in the long run? What are the alternatives and solutions? We are going to talk in a very progressive manner about those issues. So let me begin with you, Mr. Ashok Desai. What do you think about this sum? I'm not getting into politics. We'll have politicians on the show later tonight. But what do you think about this measure? All right, we'll go back to Mr. Desai. I have Mr. Amitabh Dubey also. Mr. Dubey, let me ask you this question. Was there an alternative?
Yes, there are. Of course, there's always alternatives. The important point is not the sum itself, the 176,000 crores, which unlike the 2G 176,000 crores is actual money. The issue is how it is being done. As you know, Raghuram Rajan was opposed to it. Urjit Patel, who had been handpicked by Mr. Modi, resigned on the issue. Previous Reserve Bank governors, Mr. Subbarao and Reddy, have opposed it. And a paper by CAFRAL, which is the RBI's own think tank, has argued that rather than reduce the core reserves, they need to be increased substantially by 60%. This is the RBI's own think tank. Now, of course, the Jalan committee has its point of view.
Yeah.
But the broader question is, finally they found an RBI governor who's willing to go along with them. And we've seen this in institution after institution. So I think the broader question is not about whether the sum is needed or not needed. And
but
it's
the
very
government
unusual.
says it's an independent decision of the RBI.
Well, it clearly isn't, because they were looking around for RBI governors who would actually agree with this policy, and they finally picked one. So this is a form of governance that we've seen repeatedly, and unfortunately the RBI, which for many years has been seen as one of the leading central banks, their credibility is quite eroded.
Okay. Rajat Sethi, would you like to respond to that? My point is, post the response, Rajat, I would also want to discuss alternatives and other steps that need to be taken. I mean, see, a criticism is, and Mr. Dubey, bear me out, many people would say that if the government had not acted, then the accusation would have been that the government has not acted. Now that the government has acted, the criticism is, why did you take this decision? So do we need to let this play out, perhaps refill those, that amount? I'll just ask Rajat and then come back to you. Rajat.
Yeah. Sanket ji, this entire issue of how the staggered surplus reserves have to be distributed isn't this fiscal year's concern. This concern has been there historically, and you can very well, also go back to 2013 when this issue, when the UPA was in power and this issue came up, and they constituted the YH Malagam report committee, which went into the details and recommended 99.9% of the dividends to be given over to the central government. That was in that year around 50,000 crore rupees was given for the first time, acknowledging that yes, these reserves, keeping the RBI Act's theme of transferring the profits to the central government in mind, that was done. The principal problem here is over the past 4 or 5 years, we have seen that there is an arbitrary nature to the staggered surplus being given to the central government. For example, in 2016 fiscal year, around 65,000 crore rupees was transferred, but in the very next year, the amount fell down to 35,000 crores. When there is this level of arbitrary aspects associated with it, the government of the day, whose budgetary estimates go off the chart because of this lack of concrete numbers coming in from the RBI. Therefore, a method had to be put to this, and therefore the Bimal Jalan committee, which also had the former deputy governor Rakesh Mohanji also, who was quite critical of the way it was, the surplus was being given back to the government. He was also part of that committee, and a lot of eminent economists were part of this independent committee constituted by the RBI. They looked into the merit, and they've come out with certain benchmarks. They've come out with a confidence level intervals as to how do we account for what is adequate, how much amount of reserve is adequate. Therefore, they've come out with a formulation, and they have come out with this number.
Okay.
Now, we can get into the debate, which is purely going to be technical and not political, whether their assessment is right or wrong. But let me tell you, former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley ji is no longer with us. But he pointed out very important thing because of the previous RBI policy on interest rate numbers as well. He said that interest rate, the inflation targeting of RBI is benchmarked around 4%. That's where the ideal level is. But that is the average inflation number.
Okay.
But what has happened with RBI's overly conservative, approach to policy making, they've started treating 4% of inflation number as an upper limit instead of an average. An average means half the time you can be above that limit and half the time below it. But for 5 years consistently, we had such low inflation numbers. And we went, this mindset crawled into the minds that somehow 4% is the upper limit. See, this is why the RBI's conservative nature has to be challenged intellectually and through debates as to what is adequate.
Okay.
What are the results that you're trying to
Fair
aim
enough.
at?
That's
and in fact,
the point that you've made.
Also stated that
Rajat,
we
the
can
point
have
that
the
you're
RBI
making,
jointly monitoring this fund.
The point that you're making is extremely debatable. I can see that a lot of people are raring to go, but let me get in a view of Renu Kohli on this, and we'll try to fix that line with Mr. Ashok Desai. Renu Kohli as well as Mr. Sunil Alag. You know, if you've got R. Gandhi, is the ex-deputy governor Renu of the RBI. He says that the amount is not that big. He says 1.23 lakh crore rupees looks big in historical perspective, but technically it is not that big. Going forward, there is a formula which has been set with flexibility. And he also says that there is not a definite number, but there is a range.
Yeah, he's right. He's right, because the amount, if you see what the committee has done, there are two significant changes. One is that it has asked the RBI to reflect the difference, two subcomponents of economic capital on its balance sheet on the liability side henceforth, and it has divided into two components. One is the realized equity, and the second is the revaluation reserves. The committee has emphasized that the revaluation reserves are just merely, market movements, and therefore they are not they are undistributable. So it's the realized equity or the retained earnings, as it were, which are to be reckoned for. The second is that the committee has changed the methodology by which the stress expected by the central bank is calculated. It has shifted to another method called the expected shortfall as against the stressed value at risk methodology that the RBI was using earlier. And therein lies the difference. We have not seen the report as yet, so it's not possible to comment as to how much is the capital that is released from that shift in methodology. Having said that, the committee has also given two ranges, which a very wide, a rather wide range of the overall economic capital, which is between 20 to 24.5% of the RBI's assets. It found that currently it's the RBI's economic capital as on 30th June 2019 stood at 23.3% of its assets. Now, it did not make any prescriptions as to how much should be transferred by way of regular dividend to the government. That decision has been taken by the Central Board of the Reserve Bank. And the Central Bank the Central Board decided on the lower bound. The lower bound suggested by the committee was 20% of RBI's assets, right? It could have decided on 24.5%. So the huge extraordinary amount comes from there. And while it is technical, it is stunning. And in all likelihood, we have yet to see the RBI's annual report and the accounts as to where it comes from. But most likely it is coming from the exceptional 3 trillion worth of OMOs that the RBI did last year.
Okay.
If I have the time, or maybe in the next round, I would like to see where
I'll come back to you.
From.
Let me accommodate some more views.
Go on, or should I wait?
No,
for my
I'm
turn
going to
next
come back
round?
to you. We'll just accommodate two more comments and then we'll start a fresh round. Ashok Desai, you know, for an R Gandhi, for every R Gandhi, you also have a Viral Acharya who says the risks of undermining the central bank's independence are potentially catastrophic. He said this in October 2018. Then you have a Raghuram Rajan who says, and I quote, a fundamental lesson in economics is that there is no free lunch. This can be seen in the matter of the RBI dividend. Some commentators seem to suggest that public sector banks could be recapitalized entirely if only the RBI paid a larger dividend to the government, said in September 2016. Now, in all likelihood, this is exactly what is going to happen. Bank recapitalization of, I don't know the amount exactly, 70,000 crores maybe, that's what we are reading, is going to come off this amount.
I think that it's not just a risk, but it has already happened. The Reserve Bank has been raided.
Okay,
strong words. A raider was sent from Delhi. He took over the Reserve Bank, got rid of the governor, and transferred this 1,76,000 crore. It's not the figures that matter. What matters is the principle. And the principle is the independence of the Reserve Bank. And this is extremely important for macroeconomic reasons. This is what is gone already.
But you know, I'm going to go a step further. And Sunil Alag, I want to bring you in. First of all, your comments, and sorry to keep you waiting, Sunil. Number one, what do you think about this move? And number two, what are the alternatives? Because, you know, clearly if you want to revive the economy, 1.76 lakh crores is not going to revive your economy. You need more steps. So let's talk solutions.
No, you know, look,
first of all,
I've been listening to all the economists out there, and I don't want to get into the technical debate on what it was. I respect Bimal Jalan and Rakesh Mohan. They're all very conservative Reserve Bank people. Now, they've given a range, and what the present RBI governor has taken the top level of the range and given it. He's not exceeded it. So, assuming that this commission or the committee has done the right thing, they've given the figure and they've given it in. Now, what were the alternatives that were there? This is not recurring. I mean, it's done because this is a crisis situation. Why we are in this, we can have a big debate. But what do you suggest today? 1,76,000 for RBI, it is to maintain stability in the economic system. If the banking system is strong, RBI is strong. So what they have done is, even if it goes into the banks, even if it goes into recapitalization, it's a good thing for the country to have a stable economic system, which is what I look at. What were the alternatives? Look, this 1,76,000 is not enough. Today we want employment in, money is required for infrastructure. What we have to focus on, where is the government going to spend this money? If they spend the money on infrastructure which leads to employment, great. Take it all that. If you take it in and they say, okay, this is for ourselves, they're doing the wrong thing. So you have to let it play out. What are the options? The government, if you didn't take it in, they would have to increase taxes. If they increase taxes, the middle income group would scream. You're back into the vicious circle again. If they didn't increase the taxes, they would have had to print money. If they printed money, inflation would go up. So it's really asking for proper solutions. This was the best solution that could be offered by Bimal Jalan and Rakesh Mohan.
Okay.
And the governor has not gone outside the limit that has been set by this committee. So we can carry on debating till the cows come home.
Okay.
And all I'm saying is, what was the alternative? The alternative was to get the middle income group to pay more. Or you have a higher inflation. So we can, this is, I mean,
No, I think the point that the point that Mr. Desai seems to be making
the money in the right place, it's a great
weakening
amount.
weakening an organization like the Reserve Bank of India. I think that's the point that he was making. But I also agree to a fact that this is a government which had to take certain decisions.
You weaken India, what is the point of the RBI? Then the whole country goes down and so does the RBI. No, come on. I mean, you are not weakening the RBI at all.
Not going down.
If you weaken the RBI and you weaken the
Mr.
country,
Desai,
what is the
you want to
RBI
comment?
going to do? I mean, nothing.
No, Mr. Desai wants to respond. Yeah.
There is no such crisis. We don't really know why the government wants so much money and what it's going to spend on. It hasn't said a word. And in these circumstances, to assume that there is a great crisis and the money had to be obtained and so on, this is all nonsense.
Okay.
And the major point is that the Reserve Bank, all over the country, central banks are independent institutions of central governments, and they have a certain duty to perform, namely economic stability, and this is what is being destroyed in this country. The government has taken over
Amitabh
the
Dubey
Reserve
and then
Bank,
Renu Kohli.
and it
and then
doesn't
Rajat.
matter anymore.
Yes, Amitabh.
See, I think the problem is that either because the government didn't push reform hard enough or demonetization, various other reasons, we do have a serious economic problem. Household savings is at a 20-23-year low. Unemployment is, by some measures, 45-year low. And the problem is that this seems to be one of many unsystematic, somewhat desperate measures. This raiding has been going on with the Public Provident Fund. They've been raiding that for funds. Public sector cash reserves have been raided by selling PSUs to each other and calling it disinvestment. You have food corporation arrears are at a record high. Fertilizer arrears, as in subsidy arrears to fertilizer companies, which I think when Piyush Goyal was finance minister, he criticized the UPA for, are exactly at the same levels as they were then. So the problem is that they don't seem to have a strategy as opposed to sort of instinctive, quick, short-term fixes, and this unfortunately seems like one of them.
Okay. Sunil Alag, I believe you have a point. And then Rajat Sethi.
Yeah, I just want to tell him, look what happened in America. When Obama gave all the money to the banks, it was necessary on that day, no? So their fiscal deficit went up, everything went up, and the economy is bounced back. Why are you forgetting all this? So you can get as conservative. This is a desperate situation which requires desperate measures, as far as I'm concerned. What did Obama do? He gave all the money to all the banks when they went into that crisis, because he had to pull them out. And their fiscal deficit went up that year, then they brought it back to normalcy. Look, give the government time to play out what they are doing. If they spend the money in the wrong places, you're right. But if they spend the money in the right places, employment will go up. Industry will be. Where are they going to spend the money? They have to create employment.
So
they have to generate
one moment.
demand.
Renu Kohli,
because without demand, there's nothing that's going to move.
Renu Kohli, very quickly, I'm running out of time. Renu Kohli, so the point over here is that this was a risk the government was willing to take. And the risk also involved criticism for, raiding the RBI. That's what Mr. Desai says. Do you think that this was a risk worth taking? I mean, it's an extraordinary step, but what if it works? Or will it?
Two things. One is, of course, the government's fiscal requirements. Now, there is such a thing called living beyond your means. When you don't have the adequate resources, you have to cut down and prune spending. And unfortunately, the time has come now that the government has really no option other than to make hard choices. Even its capital spending just rose for a year in 2015. Ever since then, on the revenue expenditure, which is basically interest payments, salaries, wages, and subsidies, welfare spending, that has gone on increasing exponentially. It has to rationalize expenditure and create the fiscal sources. all the points that were made about, unpaid subsidy bills to FCI, huge dividend payouts from PSUs, which have now been eroded, all that is absolutely correct. And then, since last year, tax collections are going down. So what do you do at the household level? If your income goes down, you've got to prune spending. And within spending cuts, you have to see whether you want to withdraw your children from school or, pay, probably not renew your gym membership. So the situation is a bit like that.
Austerity.
B, Mr. Alag is entirely wrong, incorrect in comparing US financial crisis with India. So that's a complete no-no. And third, it's the central bank, central board of the RBI, which has taken the decision. The lower bound, that is the minimum level that the committee prescribed, has been taken by the central board to decide the payout. So, which means operationally that the RBI has very little or wiggle room or maneuverability should anything happen. And if you go back in history, look at 1991, there was a massive devaluation.
Yeah, Ms. Kohli, completely running out of time.
I want to had to draw upon its contingency reserve fund. Yes.
Correct. Let me quickly go for 15 seconds to Mr. Rajat Sethi. I have completely run out of time, Rajat. The last word goes to you. Very quickly, please.
Yeah, Sanketji, my thought process is very simple. RBI in its priority setting and goal setting has to reorient itself to the larger economies and their reserve banks. We need to clearly look at, is inflation targeting the end goal, or the nominal growth the end goal. There are a lot of debates happening in the US about the Indian Reserve Bank also, and intellectual debates. Right now, RBI's overly conservative approach is costing the country. And we have been through these debates several times on your channel as well. And I believe this is the time when certain people who are outside, who don't have direct stakes, like Bimal Jalan and all, who have served in their capacities, look at a broader picture, come out with unbiased solutions to the problems. And these problems are not created today. These are long lingering problems, and some solution had to be found
Rajat
out.
Sethi, Sunil Alag, Renu Kohli, Amitabh
answers.
Dubey, as well as Mr. Desai, thank you so much. That's all the time that I have in this discussion. In the short term, politics will play out, and in the long term, we will know whether this decision was good or bad. Thank you to all of you all for joining us on this broadcast. Transfer of surplus RBI funds to the government has invited a lot of sharp criticism, particularly from the opposition. And joining us now is Congress MP Anand Sharma. Good evening, Mr. Sharma. Why does the Congress feel that the cash inflow from the RBI is a bad move?
Well, the entire surplus of the income of 2018-19 stands transferred. The Reserve Bank of India is supposed to keep a contingency reserve buffer. That's to meet any extraordinary situation, any emergency, which should be ideally up to 6.5%. Now they brought it down to 5.5%. And what the RBI board yesterday has approved on the recommendations of the committee, which Dr. Jalan was heading. Now, Dr. Jalan himself had said that it will not be done in one go, it will be done over a period of 4 to 5 years. Never before such a thing has happened. And if you look at the manner in which it has been done, first, the government of India pushes the RBI, and when there is resistance, they invoke the Section 7 of the RBI Act. As a result, the then governor finally quits, because no responsible governor of the central bank of a major economy or an emerging economy would give up that cover. So Urjit Patel resigned. Prior to him, Raghuram Rajan had opposed. And after what has happened, all the former governors, you see Dr. Reddy, Dr. Subbarao, and also the Deputy Governor Viral Acharya, he has said it will be catastrophic. So it's not opposition which is saying it. It's the economists, former governors, they all are saying it. And the question therefore arises why. There is a fiscal crisis in the country. The government has badly managed the economy. the revenue situation is bad. The tax collection is poor. Last year there was a shortfall, and the government can't deny when it comes to the budgeted expenditure of about 1.5 lakh crore. Now 69,000 crore of that were the subsidies for the poor, which were never paid because the government just cut out that expenditure to maintain their commitment on fiscal deficit. Now this time, if you look at the revised estimate and the economic survey, there is again the mismatch. Now it is 1% of the GDP between the RE and the survey, that is 9.2% to 8.2. Calculated, it comes to exactly 1.7 lakh crore. Now even in numerical terms, even in numbers, it's the same, 1.7 lakh crore.
So you see a correlation.
So how this means that what? Of course it is very clear, exactly the same amount gets transferred. It's not that I am making up these numbers today. So the Reserve Bank was told to make up for that. As a result, the entire surplus is not percentage of it, it's the entire surplus which goes. What does the government have for future? Is there a guaranteed benchmark for the Reserve Bank of India's income? It may not be the income next year. What will get transferred? Because even if the government is not taking it to the general expenditure side, but from the capital account or the capital investments, then what happens? Where will they fund it for future? Where will they get the money? But at the same time, the Reserve Bank has been made vulnerable. We have examples of other countries. Are we headed in that direction? If we are a robust economy, why such a situation has arisen? The Central Bank of Argentina did it, and the economy crashed. Today, my concerns are manifold. The economic scenario is not recession. It's a grim situation. We are sliding downhill. Our GDP is constantly going down. If we are lucky, maybe 5.6% in this Q1 of this financial year. So the claims of Finance Minister that we are the fastest growing economy and comparing ourselves to America and China are astonishing.
Okay. Now,
because America is close to 23 trillion.
Mr. Sharma, interesting
China
you mentioned
is 15 trillion. Where?
No, Mr. Sharma, it's interesting you mentioned Nirmala Sitharaman, this question.
Yes.
From what you have said right now, it appears that you feel that the government has proposed or the government has forced, if I may, the RBI to take a step like this. Nirmala Sitharaman in a press conference calls this. She says this allegation is outlandish. This is a decision by an independent board of the RBI.
English dictionary is full of words, but the fact is that you had the former governor resign when the Section 7 notice was threatened. Government said that they are invoking it. So if any finance minister should be honest to one's own conscience and to the facts, how does it happen? It's a very strange thing that you have a mismatch of 1%, which is 1.7 lakh crore. Then again you have the numbers telling you the same story. And after that, from 16.3 to 14.7 is exactly the same, 1.7 lakh crore. Okay. And what you get transferred is the entire surplus of income, which again is 1 point. So we are not making up anything.
Okay.
How can Nirmala Sitharaman use these words? Let me say one thing to her then. This government is guilty of a monumental mismanagement of the Indian economy. Your manufacturing has collapsed. Your exports are frozen. You are not increasing. Your investments are not taking place. private sector has no money to lend. You have gone in for absolutely irresponsible decisions like allowing these sovereign bonds in foreign currency. You'll make this country indebted in perpetuity.
Okay.
One has to analyze. We have indicated today many parameters for which the national data must be released immediately.
Okay. Mr.
Because
Sharma.
this government is guilty also of embellishing numbers and fudging the national
Okay,
accounts.
that's a serious allegation. But Mr. Sharma, before we let you go, my final question.
I am not saying allegation. The former chief statisticians of India, not one but many have commented.
Sure.
And the last one resigned.
Okay. My final question
It's
before
not me making up anything.
Yeah, okay. I understand, Mr. Sharma. Before we let you go, my final question. The Union Cabinet is expected to approve major FDI reforms tomorrow in insurance, digital media, single brand retail. What do you make of this? It seems that as of this moment, the government has stepped on the gas to first of all, understand that there is something wrong and then revive the economy.
Good luck to them. And the governments are expected to do that. They have woken up from their slumber, and if they try to clean up a mess which they have created, because they were clueless as to what was happening to the Indian
Do you think
economy.
they should have acknowledged this situation earlier?
They are very arrogant, they won't acknowledge. But one thing, let me tell you, what you have just said about the FDI. I remember when we were in government and I was the minister responsible, and the opposition that we faced, and the government was dragged to a vote in both the houses on FDI and multi-brand retail. Now I'm happy that if the present government, the Prime Minister who opposed it, realizes that what we did was right. Same is the case, the same case like Aadhaar, like the GST. So what we were doing, there was wisdom, they fought with us, they abused us, and now if they are accepting it, good luck. It's our country after all. We wish the country well. We don't want our people to suffer because of a crashing economy.
All right. Mr. Anand Sharma, appreciate you joining us right here on NDTV. Let me also quickly get in a word from the BJP's Lalita Kumaramangalam now. Ms. Kumaramangalam, I don't know whether you could hear what Mr. Anand Sharma said, but he seems to say that Nirmala Sitharaman calling this outlandish is not correct, right? He also feels that had this situation been acknowledged earlier, we could have, a stitch in time could have saved 9. How would you respond? You've seen the allegations of the Congress.
Yes, Sanket, I had that bit that he said about language, but I suppose I could say the same thing about him. The Congress will find it very difficult to find anything good in anything the Modi government does. Having said that, what the finance minister said from her point of view is quite apt. But let me put what Mr. Anand Sharma has, the criticisms he made from my perspective, what I feel about what he said. And I'm going to state facts. I've got facts in front of me. I'm not going to give any personal opinions, unlike he did. First of all, the global median that reserve banks or federal banks, whatever you want to call them, in various countries, and I'm talking about developing countries, I'm not talking about Argentina or Panama or any African country, etc., is 16% is what their reserves normally are. In FY18, financial year 18, the RBI had 26.5%, and in 17 it had 25.4. So even if they have transferred 1.7 lakh crores of their surplus funds, which is all of their surplus this year, to the government of India, the RBIs, neither is their independence going to be compromised, nor is their financial stability going to take a hit. It is widely acknowledged that Bimal Jalan is a very sensible and a very practical man. This decision was not made, single-handedly or unilaterally or dictatorially, which is a term which is often, bandied about by the anti-Modi camp about the BJP government, but has been made on the basis of a recommendation that a committee that was headed by Bimal Jalan. It's easy to call him anybody's stooge, but that's a political name you're calling him. Everybody knows that he's not done something just out of the blue because the government asked him to do it. 1. 2, we should realize that something like this obviously cannot happen overnight. The government has taken cognizance of the fact, and very fast, please. We've just come back to power in May. Whereas the Congress and other people expected us to go out with a bang.
Ms. Kumaramangalam, I would just like to, I'd just like to come in here. This point that you are making about acting fast.
The government, let me just finish.
Yeah, just this one small point. You are saying that the government acted fast. The allegation over here by the opposition is that the telltale signs were there for many, many years in Modi 1 as well. And had you acted then, that's the allegation, had you acted then, had these contingency measures been taken then, but perhaps
like I said, Sanket,
a step like this would not have been required.
Like I said, Sanket, the Congress will not be able to find anything good in this. Now, the opposition itself, I mean, if it was somebody speaking from a position of real expertise, one would understand. But the economy has not been doing badly for the past few years. At the moment, there is a global slowdown. It's not just in India. Every economy, major economy, has also slowed down. Also, Nirmala Sitharamanji has not lied when she has said, or anybody, none of us are lying when we say that India is still the fastest growing amongst the larger economies of the world. Nobody claimed that we are the largest economy in the world. To compare what US's economy, GDP is to India is ridiculous. Quite frankly, we never said that at all. But it is true that we are still the fastest growing economy. And it is also equally true that yes, we have hit a slowdown. The government has taken cognizance of it. Last week, the Honorable Finance Minister announced about 5-6 measures. And during that meeting, she very clearly said that over the next couple of weeks, we will be announcing twice more. I will come to you, to the people and to the press to explain, to come in with new announcements. You yourself just a few minutes ago said that the cabinet is meeting tomorrow and it is suspected that they are going to come out with a slew of new norms, relaxation of norms for FDI. Now, it's not as if the government is not taking cognizance, and no economy slows down in 2 months or 3 months. Yes, there has been a global slowdown which has been threatening. It has today also reached India. We are more than aware of it. And having been brought back to power the way we have, I mean, whether you want to believe or not is a different question, but the BJP and the NDA government, Modi 2.0 as people are fond of saying, is more than aware of its responsibility. We have always said that we put the common man in this country first. And yes, at the moment he is suffering, which is why, wouldn't you say that in 3 weeks or in 3 months immediately after coming into government, understanding this or trying our best to understand it and coming up with changes from what perhaps was announced earlier is a good decision. We are being constantly told you need to be fiscally flexible. Prudent, yes, but flexible. When we are being flexible, you find fault with it. And we are not being flexible in an irresponsible way. We have kept, the fiscal deficit is not going to go up. Or if it does, it will go up very, very marginally. And I don't think anybody can claim that at the moment it's going to go up.
All right.
We have not done anything unilaterally. We've taken the advice of a very sage man who headed a committee that was full of experts. This was not a decision made by the government of India. This was a decision that was made by a committee of experts.
I get your point. That's exactly what Nirmala Sitharaman also said, that this is a decision that has been taken by a group of people in the RBI and not the government, though the government is being criticized as of this moment to have pressurized the RBI.
Stands to
that's
benefit,
the allegation.
yes, of course.
To pressurize the RBI, which is
benefit.
why some previous governors even had to resign from their job. That's the allegation. But we are going to save the politics. This is going to go on for another day. Ms. Lalitha Kumaramangalam, many thanks for joining us right here on NDTV.